On a chilly November evening in Kansas City, Kansas, police were dispatched to the Maple Hill laundromat. The officers arrived to a scene that would haunt them for years to come. A young boy named December Hto lay lifeless, the aftermath of a violent robbery gone horribly wrong. The laundromat, usually a place of routine and calm, was now a site of chaos and confusion. Shell casings were scattered on the floor, but the shooter had vanished into the night. Who could have done such a deed to a young lad, and was it an act of revenge or a grudge? December Hto was a young boy who had immigrated to the United States from Myanmar, a country in Southeast Asia known for its tumultuous political landscape. December belonged to the Karen ethnic group, one of the many minority groups in Myanmar that has faced persecution over the years. His family, seeking a safer and more stable life, resettled in Kansas City, Kansas. In Kansas City, December Hto quickly integrated into his new environment. At the age of 15, he was a sophomore at J.C. Harmon High School. His peers and teachers remember him as a diligent student with a cheerful disposition. December was not only academically inclined, but also physically active. He was a dedicated member of his high school's wrestling team. His involvement in sports showcased his determination and discipline, traits that endeared him to both his coaches and teammates. Likewise, December's life extended beyond the school grounds. He was a devout Christian and an active member of his local church community. His participation in church activities, including youth camps and Bible study sessions, was a testament to his strong faith and his desire to be an integral part of his community. Despite his young age, December had already experienced the hardships of life as a refugee. These experiences, however, only strengthened his resolve to make the most of the opportunities available to him in the United States, and his family, proud of his accomplishments and the young man he was becoming, supported him in every way they could. On the evening of November 18, 2017, December Hto was performing his routine duties at the Maple Hill laundromat in Kansas City, Kansas. It was a quiet night, and the establishment was preparing to close. December was likely focused on ensuring everything was in order before he locked up for the night. However, the tranquility of the evening was shattered when an attempted robbery took place. The details of the robbery remain somewhat unclear, but what is known is that during this attempt, December was shot. The bullet wounds proved fatal, and December Hto's life was tragically cut short at the tender age of 15. Immediately after the shooting, the scene at the laundromat was chaotic. The police were quickly called, and officers arrived to find December lying lifeless. Despite their efforts to investigate the crime, the scene offered little in the way of immediate clues. The police did, however, find shell casings at the scene. These casings were quickly submitted to the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, NIBIN. NIBIN is a specialized database that allows law enforcement agencies to compare ballistic evidence from different crime scenes. By entering the shell casings into NIBIN, investigators hope to find a match that could link the bullets to a specific firearm or a series of other crimes. Despite these efforts, the initial results from NIBIN were disappointing. There were no matches found for the shell casings, meaning the firearm used in December's slaying had not been linked to any other crimes at that time. Compounding the challenge was the absence of eyewitnesses. No one had come forward with any information about seeing the shooter or witnessing the events leading up to the shooting. The laundromat did not have any surveillance cameras that could provide visual evidence, and nearby businesses also failed to offer any useful footage. Without visual evidence or eyewitness accounts, the investigators had very little to go on. They conducted numerous interviews with people who might have been in the area at the time of the shooting, but these efforts yielded no substantial leads, and the investigators were left with more questions than answers. In the weeks and months following the incident, December's family were left in shock and grief, struggling to understand how such a promising young life could be taken so suddenly and violently. They made numerous public appeals for information. They held vigils and community meetings, trying to keep his memory alive and urging anyone with information to come forward. Years passed without significant progress in the investigation of December Hto's slaying. The case seemed destined to remain unsolved until a crucial breakthrough occurred in 2021. This development began with an unrelated investigation by the Lenexa Police Department, which led to the recovery of a firearm. During routine ballistics testing, shell casings from this firearm were submitted to the National Integrated Ballistic Information Network, NIBIN, for comparison. Remarkably, the shell casings from this newly recovered gun matched those found at the scene of December Hto's slaying. This match provided a critical lead, suggesting that the firearm used in December's shooting had been involved in another incident. The owner of the gun, when questioned by the police, suggested that Luis Samano, who was 17 at the time of December's slaying, might have been the one who fired the fatal shots. With this new information, the case was reopened, and a renewed investigative effort began. In May 2024, Detective Lily Suk from the Cold Case Unit was assigned to the case. She brought fresh eyes and a determined approach to solving the case. Suk began by reviewing all the existing evidence and looking for new angles to pursue. One of the critical steps Suk took was to re-examine any available video footage from the night of the incident. While the Maple Hill laundromat did not have its own surveillance system, Suk knew that nearby businesses might have captured something useful. She painstakingly reviewed hours of footage from cameras positioned near the laundromat, looking for anything that could place a suspect at the scene. In June 2024, her diligence paid off. Suk discovered footage that showed a vehicle near the laundromat around the time of the shooting. This vehicle had not been identified in the initial investigation, but Suk was able to trace its movements and eventually link it to Luis Samano. This connection was crucial, as it placed Samano at the scene of the crime and supported the ballistic evidence that tied him to the shooting. Armed with this new information, Suk conducted a series of interviews. She spoke with individuals who might have had contact with Samano around the time of the incident, gathering testimonies that helped build a timeline of events. These interviews provided additional context and corroborated the evidence linking Samano to the crime. With everything in place, Suk compiled a detailed report and presented it to the Wyandotte County District Attorney's Office. On July 11, 2024, the Wyandotte County District Attorney's Office officially charged Luis Samano with premeditated slaying and attempted aggravated robbery. This development marked a significant milestone in the case, bringing hope and a sense of closure to December's family and the community that had mourned his loss for nearly 7 years. Following the formal charges against Luis Samano, a court date was scheduled to begin the legal proceedings. The initial hearing was set for August 15, 2024, at the Wyandotte County District Court. This hearing would mark the beginning of the judicial process, during which the prosecution would present its evidence and the defense would respond to the charges. The community and December's family are preparing for the next phase in their pursuit of justice, hoping that the legal system will provide a fair and just resolution to the case. On April 29, 2004, the life of a young boy named Christopher Houston Jr. was tragically cut short. At just 3 years old, Christopher was found unresponsive in his home. The circumstances of his death were harrowing and set off a series of investigations that would span nearly 2 decades. Christopher Houston Jr. was living in Atlanta, Georgia, with his father, Christopher Lavelle Houston Sr., and his mother. On that fateful day, the young boy had been playing outside, as was common for children his age. His parents later recounted to the police that after playing, Christopher Jr. came inside to lie down. They claimed that when they checked on him approximately 2 hours later, he was unresponsive. What could have happened in those crucial 2 hours after Christopher Jr. came inside? Was it just that, or was there more to the story? The initial investigation revealed the brutal nature of his injuries. The boy had suffered from blunt force trauma to the head. Additionally, he had a displaced femur, a clear sign of severe physical trauma, and numerous contusions were found on his head, back, and arms. These injuries painted a grim picture of the last moments of Christopher Jr.'s life. Despite the clear indications of foul play, the investigation struggled to find a definitive suspect. Both Christopher Sr. and the child's mother were interviewed extensively. The details provided by the parents were consistent in describing that Christopher Jr. had been playing outside and then went to rest. However, the circumstances leading to his fatal injuries remained unclear. From the beginning, both Christopher Lavelle Houston Sr. and the child's mother were considered persons of interest. Likewise, the medical examination was unequivocal. The young boy had died from blunt force trauma. The injuries he sustained, such as the displaced femur and multiple contusions, were indicative of severe and repeated physical assault. However, the lack of witnesses and concrete evidence meant that these findings alone were insufficient to press charges. For years, the case remained in the archives, a cold case that haunted the detectives who initially worked on it. The death was officially classified as a homicide, but without new evidence or leads, the investigation could not progress. Finally, in May 2023, nearly 2 decades after the tragic death of Christopher Houston Jr., a significant breakthrough occurred that reignited the cold case. Christopher Lavelle Houston Sr. was arrested in South Fulton, Georgia, on unrelated charges, including assault and child abuse. These charges against Houston Sr. prompted a re-examination of his past, including the unresolved case of his son's homicide. During this period, investigators received new leads from some of Houston Sr.'s relatives, who came forward with crucial information that had previously been unknown or unshared with the authorities. This new information led the Atlanta Police Department to delve deeper into the case files, re-interviewing witnesses and family members. This time, they discovered that certain relatives of Houston Sr. had withheld critical information back in 2004. These relatives, now more forthcoming, provided details that implicated Houston Sr. more directly in the abuse and death of his son. The case development hinged on the reassessment of medical evidence and witness statements. The initial medical report that had documented severe blunt force trauma to Christopher Jr.'s head, a displaced femur, and numerous contusions across his body, combined with these new witness testimonies, painted a picture of ongoing abuse rather than an isolated incident. The arrest warrant issued in 2024 highlighted these injuries and included statements from relatives who described patterns of behavior consistent with abuse. These new statements were crucial in building a case against Houston Sr. As a result, Christopher Lavelle Houston Sr. was indicted on charges of murder in July 2024. This indictment was a significant breakthrough, marking the first time that someone had been formally charged in connection with Christopher Jr.'s death. The charges against Houston Sr. included counts of felony murder, child cruelty, and aggravated assault. With the indictment, the case had moved into the legal proceedings phase, and court dates were being scheduled. The community's support for the family and the call for justice remained strong, as everyone's awaiting the trial. The hope is that the legal proceedings would finally bring some measure of justice for Christopher Houston Jr. and provide a sense of closure to those who had been affected by his tragic death.
On the night of June 12, 1963, in Winnebago County, Wisconsin, a seemingly ordinary evening took a tragic turn. Wayne Pratt, a well-known gas station operator, was at home, just 50 feet away from the gas station he ran on Old Highway 41. At around 8:40 p.m., while he was watching television, a car pulled up to the gas station. Dutifully, Wayne went to assist the customer, as he often did. However, this night would be different. When Wayne did not return home promptly, his wife, Marie Pratt, grew concerned. Noticing that the lights at the station had not been turned on, she decided to check on him. What she found would forever change her life. Wayne Pratt was discovered in the back room of the station, covered by a blanket, having been brutally stabbed 53 times. The crime scene was horrific, and evidence indicated that the assailant had also been injured during the attack, as there was blood that did not belong to Wayne. This gruesome murder shocked the community and launched a rigorous investigation. They conducted numerous interviews with potential witnesses and persons of interest. Among these individuals was William A. Doxtator, a Bowler, Wisconsin resident. Doxtator had been identified as a suspect shortly after the murder, largely due to tips and circumstantial evidence. However, at that time, the technology required to definitively link him to the crime scene was not available. The investigation was extensive, with law enforcement following up on every lead they received. However, as months turned into years, the trail grew cold. By 1968, despite the best efforts of the investigators, no concrete evidence had emerged that could lead to an arrest. The case was officially classified as a cold case, joining the ranks of many other unresolved crimes from that era. It was officially reopened in 2011, when investigators probed the evidence for potential DNA that could by then undergo meaningful forensic analyses and potentially help identify Platt's killer. In 2015, the testing company Sorensen Forensics did find DNA mixtures on the blanket where Platt's body was found, but the mixed composition meant authorities could not enter the information into their databases while searching for a potential suspect. 3 years later, a warrant was issued for the arrest of the suspect, William Doxtator of Bowler, Wisconsin, who was 82 at the time. Authorities in Winnebago County said that Doxtator was initially identified as a suspect in Platt's case in the days following his death in 1963, and they went on to receive tips about him in connection with Platt's death in 1968 and 2022. The real turning point arrived in 2023, when cybergenetics, utilizing their advanced true allele data analysis, managed to isolate and identify the DNA mixtures found on the blanket. Their analysis confirmed that Doxtator's DNA was statistically present among the samples. This finding, combined with historical investigative reports and statements from surviving witnesses, provided compelling evidence linking Doxtator to the crime. In 2024, the Winnebago County Sheriff's Office, armed with this new DNA evidence, concluded their investigation and referred the case to the District Attorney's Office. The DA reviewed the comprehensive reports and agreed that there was sufficient evidence to charge William Doxtator with first-degree intentional homicide. Unfortunately, Doxtator had passed away in 2022, rendering posthumous prosecution impossible. On November 27, 1988, a usual missed phone call led to a startling discovery. Every Sunday, Robert Hecht and his oldest sister had a weekly call that he never skipped. However, on that Sunday, silence hung heavy on the line. His sister was so concerned that she called the police to request that his Rio Toga's drive home in Punta Gorda, Florida, be checked on. 2 days later, on November 29th, their greatest fears had come true. 58-year-old Robert was discovered dead, brutally slain in his house. This peaceful day had turned into a terrifying spectacle. Authorities spent a lot of time looking into the case. However, for 3 decades, there wasn't any progress in the case. Just when hope seemed to be fading, there came a breakthrough. After 30 years, what evidence would investigators might have discovered? And more importantly, who was the person responsible? Before we move on to the future, let us recall the dark site. Investigators noted that the scene itself portrayed a bleak picture. Robert was lying deceased on the couch, and besides him there was a large, blood-stained glass ashtray. He had sustained multiple blows to the head. Evidently, the ashtray was the murder weapon, except there wasn't any indication of struggle. This implied that Robert was probably ambushed or caught off guard. In addition, he seemed to have been dead for a few days. The police determined that he passed away on the 27th, the day he failed to answer his sister's phone. At the crime scene, the police discovered additional evidence along with the weapon. A burnt matchstick lying on the back of his leg, as well as a cigarette butt on the floor. One cigarette butt that would potentially have profound impacts. Even so, there was something much more worrisome. Robert's brand-new Lincoln town car wasn't there. It had disappeared without a trace, adding an additional layer of ambiguity to a case that was already perplexing. As they delved further, the investigators attempted to trace Robert's movements prior to the slaying. Just one day before he passed away, on November 26, 1988, witnesses reported that they had seen him around the evening. However, he was accompanied by an unfamiliar face, a man who went by Ray. He was a white man with a southern accent. Those who knew Robert did not recognize him. The specifics regarding Ray were also not really clear. Ray claimed to be from Tennessee and Kentucky, and that he had split up with his wife, presently living with his daughter of age 14. Who might he be then? The more they contemplated the situation, the odd it seemed. Maybe he had something to do with Robert's demise. Robert's last known movements were pinpointed by the detectives. On the evening of the 26th, he was spotted with Ray at the Fisherman's Village Oyster Bar in Punta Gorda. Before leaving for home, Robert had even implied that he and Ray will be going to another bar. This laid forth a definite timeline and location for Robert's final hours. Nevertheless, that Ray guy remained a mystery. His identity posed the greatest obstacle in the case. The hunt for the answers expanded beyond Charlotte County. Then came a significant breakthrough. On November 28, 1988, in the town of Lenoir, North Carolina, a man was observed driving out of a store and abandoning Robert's stolen vehicle, the Lincoln he had just purchased a month before, as per the information provided to the police. More than 700 miles away from Punta Gorda, on Main Street in Lenoir, he had ditched it. Not only did this surprising discovery validate the car's theft, it also offered a plausible escape route for the assailant. Now that it was in the Lenoir police's possession, the automobile had become a crucial piece of evidence that might provide some important answers. Crime scene investigators meticulously examined the Lincoln while following the trail of the found car. Their search uncovered a critical piece of evidence: one cigarette butt. This was an interesting finding, because they had also discovered another cigarette butt close to the body previously when they had searched Robert's house. However, the one from the stolen vehicle was thought to be the perpetrator's. Robert had a strong policy against smoking in his automobile, so finding a cigarette butt inside was in fact a remarkable discovery. He himself never smoked in it or let anyone else do the same, which implied that the cigarette was probably not Robert, and perhaps it was a clue instead, accidentally left behind by the perpetrator. Just as investigators were following up on the stolen Lincoln lead, the case was about to take a new turn. A new eyewitness came forward, alleging to have seen a blonde woman in the passenger seat of the stolen vehicle. This completely blew the whole investigation off course. This blonde woman, who was she? Was she merely a random passenger or something more? Investigators conducted endless witness interview in an effort to find any discrepancies that would point them in the direction of the truth. The media increased its pressure as the days stretched into weeks, but the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office remained quiet. The absence of a motive, the unknown man Ray, and the unfamiliar blonde woman all began to hint at a planned crime gone wrong. Grief engulfed Robert's family as their Sunday routine resorted to an eerie silence. Eventually the case went cold, without any new leads to pursue and no clues. However, one question lingered throughout the investigation. Will they ever be able to catch Robert's assailant? The Robert Hecht case remained unsolved for decades until September 2021, when hope was rekindled. Detectives from Charlotte County Cold Case Unit reviewed every detail in an effort to unravel the decades-old riddle. Priority was given to witness interviews, especially those involving the mysterious figure Ray. The initial investigation revealed various details about Ray's purported past, including his residence in Tennessee and Kentucky and his separation from his wife, along with his daughter. However, due to technological limitations at the time, the investigation's progress was impeded. Although this apparently mundane info was insufficient to reduce the suspect pool, yet it held the key to discovering the truth in 2021. Thanks to developments in DNA technology, the cold case investigators had new hope. Reevaluation of the evidence took place in September 2021. When the 2 cigarette butts were sent for DNA analysis, the investigators were surprised to be met with a new discovery. Both of them had the same man's DNA on them. This was a huge breakthrough. It verified that the man who stole Robert's automobile and attacked him in his house was the same man who had smoked the cigarette that was discovered inside the car. However, one crucial element was still absent: a name for this DNA profile. Reinforced in their resolve, the investigators looked through the nation's DNA profile database, the combined DNA index system, but found nothing. This indicated that the offender had no prior criminal history. Subsequently, they advanced their investigation by uploading the findings for genealogical testing. This revolutionary method tracks a person's ancestry through DNA, potentially finding matches with family members within a database. Although there was a chance of failure, it provided a way forward where other approaches had not. Nevertheless, the decision paid off when a Tennessee-based family member was found to be a match. Now that a genealogical connection had been identified, investigators carried out interviews, looked through family trees, and directly compared with relatives. Following a lengthy investigation, they eventually located the man they had been looking for, Kenneth Ray Miller, who was just 36 years old when Robert Hecht was killed, thanks to this procedure as well as the information they had regarding the 14-year-old daughter that Ray had mentioned. Shockwaves ran through the community when Ray Miller's name was made public. Once more, witness interviews were held, but this time Ray's pictures were brought along. The findings were thrilling. People who had come across Ray earlier that tragic November 26, 1988 evening were able to positively identify him from the pictures. The witnesses revealed more than just his identity. Once they saw Ray's picture, one witness revealed an astonishing detail. Not only had they witnessed Ray and Robert together that evening on November 26th, but they had also seen him the very next morning, on November 27th, at Robert's house. This demonstrated that Ray was more than simply a passing acquaintance, as he seemed at ease enough to stay the night at Robert's house. The witness saw him laying over the end of the couch in the living room, the very couch on which Robert's lifeless body was eventually discovered. However, fate delivered a cruel twist. Investigating further, police learned that Kenneth Ray Miller had died in 2007, at the age of 55, from natural causes, taking the rest of the story with him to the afterlife. Although the identification provided some closure, it also left a gap, as there were still unanswered questions about Robert's last moments and the motive behind the crime. Though the investigation was halted several times, it went on, and Ray's background check turned up a troubling revelation. He had a history of violent offenses, such as arson, burglary, and aggravated battery. These were but a handful of the crimes he had committed in the past. This aggressive streak provided a disturbing portrayal of the man with whom Robert had spent his final hours with. Following an almost 3-decade-long and unrelenting pursuit of justice, the case was formally concluded by the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Team on March 22, 2024. But since the perpetrator is no longer alive to face prosecution, and the blonde woman has not been found, the outcome was bittersweet. The perpetrator's passing did provide some closure, while also serving as a somber reminder that Ray would never have to deal with the fallout from his deeds. The case of Robert Hecht stands as a testament to the persistent impact of investigative work. Even after decades, families longing for answers can find closure through technological improvements and the unwavering search for the truth. Though the main suspect may have died, the mysterious blonde woman remains on the road, still out there. She may know more about the crime. Could she have been an accomplice, or was she merely a coincidence in this tragic story? Robert Hecht's family can rest easy knowing that Kenneth Ray Miller has been identified, even though the case may not be completely solved. On the evening of February 27, 1991, 28-year-old Brenda Condon was wrapping up a double shift at Carlsbad Tavern in Spring Township, Pennsylvania. Brenda, who had only been working at the bar for 2 weeks, was known for her reliability and friendly demeanor. Her new job required her to close the bar after the last call, ensuring everything was cleaned and secured before heading home. However, on this particular night, something went terribly wrong. Brenda's shift was supposed to end at 6 p.m., and when the day crew arrived the next morning, they found the bar in its usual state, clean, with the receipts from the previous night neatly put away, and the lights turned off. However, there was no sign of Brenda. Her gray 1986 Mercury Capri was still in the parking lot, and her cowboy boots were found in the men's restroom. But Brenda herself was nowhere to be seen. Her absence wasn't immediately noticed by the morning crew, who assumed she had already left. It wasn't until the day shift ended at 6 p.m. that her coworkers realized something was amiss. Brenda had not been seen all day. Her car remained parked outside, and her personal belongings, including her car keys and purse, were missing. The last known sighting of Brenda was around 12:45 a.m. to 1:15 a.m., when she was seen talking to an unknown man inside the bar. On March 2, 1991, Brenda was officially reported missing. The police immediately launched an investigation, scouring the bar and its surroundings for any clues. There were no signs of a struggle, break-in, or robbery. Everything seemed normal, except for the eerie absence of Brenda. Her disappearance left her family and friends in a state of shock and confusion, unable to comprehend what could have happened to the beloved mother of 2. Brenda's children, 12-year-old Todd and 10-year-old Shauna, were particularly devastated. Brenda was supposed to pick them up for a visit on March 2nd, and the children had been eagerly waiting for her arrival. Standing outside their father's house, with their bags packed, they watched as several cars drove past, hoping each one would be their mother. But Brenda never showed up. Realizing the gravity of the situation, Brenda's ex-husband, Thomas Condon, reported her missing to the authorities. The police launched an extensive search operation involving dogs, rescue groups, and helicopters to comb every inch of the area around Carl's Bad Tavern. Despite their efforts, no trace of Brenda was found. The mystery of her disappearance deepened with each passing day, leaving her family and the community in a state of anguish and uncertainty. Brenda Condon was born on March 1, 1962, in Clearfield County, Pennsylvania. Growing up in a close-knit community, she was known for her warm smile and kind heart. Brenda's childhood was filled with typical small-town activities, and she formed lasting friendships that carried into adulthood. In 1980, she graduated from Clearfield Area High School, remembered by her classmates as a friendly and reliable friend. Brenda's early adult life was marked by significant changes. She married Thomas L. Condon, Jr., and together they had 2 children, Shauna and Todd. The family lived in Clearfield, where they raised their children in a loving environment. However, as time passed, Brenda and Thomas's marriage began to face challenges. According to Brenda's older sister, Iris Myers, the couple's relationship gradually deteriorated, leading to their eventual separation. Despite the end of their marriage, Brenda and Thomas maintained a respectful and amicable relationship. They both prioritized the well-being of their children, opting for an informal custody arrangement that allowed Shauna and Todd to live with their father while Brenda could visit them any time. This arrangement worked well for the family, as it minimized disruption to the children's lives and allowed them to stay connected with both parents. After the divorce, Brenda moved to Williamsport, Pennsylvania, where she started her own home cleaning service. Her entrepreneurial spirit and dedication to her work earned her a steady stream of clients. Brenda's ability to balance her professional responsibilities with her role as a mother was a testament to her resilience and determination. Brenda's personal life also saw new beginnings. She began a relationship with Greg Palazzari, which lasted for 2 years. The couple's bond was strong, and Brenda eventually decided to move to State College to be closer to her children and to live with Greg. This move, which occurred just a few months before her disappearance, marked another significant change in Brenda's life. She continued her home cleaning business, opening a second branch in State College. In February of 1991, Brenda took on a part-time job as a bartender at Carl's Bad Tavern in Spring Township. This decision was driven by her desire to earn additional income and stay engaged with the community. Brenda quickly adapted to her new role, becoming a familiar and friendly face at the bar. Her co-workers and patrons appreciated her warm personality and reliable work ethic. The events leading up to Brenda's disappearance were, by all accounts, unremarkable. She had worked her usual shift at Carl's Bad Tavern, interacted with patrons, and performed her closing duties. While inside the tavern, everything seemed in order. The bar was clean, the receipts from the previous night were put away, and there were no signs of a break-in or struggle. Brenda's car, a gray 1986 Mercury Capri, remained parked in the lot, and her cowboy boots were discovered in the men's restroom. However, her purse and car keys were missing, deepening the mystery. Witnesses last saw Brenda between 12:45 a.m. and 1:15 a.m. on February 27, 1991, talking to an unknown man inside the bar. This man became a key focus of the investigation, as he was potentially the last person to see Brenda before she vanished. The police released descriptions of 3 male patrons who were at the bar that night, hoping to generate leads. The first man was described as 38 to 40 years old, about 6 feet 2 inches tall, wearing a bright blue down jacket and jeans. The second man was 25 to 30 years old, approximately 5 feet 8 inches tall, dressed in a black leather coat, a white button-down shirt, and jeans. The third man was around 50 years old, 5 feet 8 inches tall, wearing a short dark-colored jacket, dark-colored slacks, and a brown plaid shirt. Despite these detailed descriptions, identifying these men proved elusive, and no solid leads emerged from the public appeals. Initially, the police focused on Brenda's ex-husband, Thomas Condon, as a potential suspect. However, Thomas had a solid alibi. He was helping his sister, Pamela Condon, move into her new apartment around the time Brenda went missing. Thomas also passed a polygraph test, which further cleared him of suspicion. The police then turned their attention to Greg Palazzari, Brenda's boyfriend at the time. Greg, too, was eventually cleared of any involvement in her disappearance. As the days turned into weeks, the lack of progress in the investigation weighed heavily on Brenda's family. They held on to the hope that Brenda might return home safely, but as time passed, the reality of her absence became harder to ignore. The community, too, was affected by Brenda's disappearance. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers joined in the search efforts, driven by a collective desire to find answers and bring Brenda home. In 1997, the case was transferred to the Pennsylvania State Police at the request of Spring Township. The state police brought additional resources and expertise to the investigation, renewing efforts to solve the case. They continued to follow up on leads and tips, but none of them led to Brenda. The case grew colder with each passing month, and the hope of finding Brenda began to fade. The investigation took an unexpected turn in 2014, when Greg Palazzari was arrested and convicted for operating a large cocaine ring out of the Sunoco gas station he owned. This revelation cast a new light on Greg's activities and raised questions about his possible involvement in Brenda's disappearance. However, despite his criminal activities, no direct evidence linked Greg to Brenda's case, and he remained officially cleared of suspicion. Adding to the intrigue, Nancy Jones, a woman who dated Greg after Brenda's disappearance, came forward with her own suspicions. Nancy believed that Greg might have inadvertently placed Brenda in harm's way due to his involvement in drug dealing. While she didn't think Greg had murdered Brenda, she speculated that his dangerous lifestyle could have led to her being targeted. Unfortunately, this theory, like many others, couldn't be proven, and the investigation continued without definitive answers. Over the years, investigators continued to scrutinize the events of that fateful night from February 1991. They revisited the descriptions of the 3 unidentified male patrons at Carlsbad Tavern, hoping that advancements in technology and forensics might provide new insights. Sketches of these men were re-released to the public, along with renewed appeals for information. Despite these efforts, the men remained unidentified, and the mystery of their possible involvement persisted. In an effort to keep the case in the public eye, the police and Brenda's family held a press conference on the 10th anniversary of her disappearance in 2001. During this event, they discussed the lack of leads, the unidentified patrons, and the decision to enter Brenda's case into the National Database System for Missing Persons. This database provided a centralized platform for sharing information across jurisdictions, increasing the chances of uncovering new leads. By 2020, Brenda had been missing longer than she had been alive. The enduring mystery of her disappearance continued to weigh heavily on her family and the community. However, hope was rekindled in April 2024, when Detective Kenneth Maines, a renowned cold case investigator and host of the Unsolved No More podcast, took an interest in Brenda's case. Detective Maines, celebrated for his success in solving cold cases in central Pennsylvania, brought fresh eyes and new techniques to the investigation. His involvement reinvigorated the search for answers, bringing renewed attention to the case. In a 26-episode YouTube series, Maines shared his findings and theories about Brenda's disappearance, captivating a wide audience and drawing more public interest to the case. Maines's investigation led him to suspect a co-worker of Brenda's at Carlsbad Tavern, described as a hot-headed womanizer. This co-worker, according to Maines, had been obsessively interested in Brenda's case and might have played a role in her disappearance. Members of the tavern's crew confirmed that this co-worker had a particular fixation on Brenda, adding weight to Maines's theory. Maines turned over his findings to Brenda's family, encouraging them to present the information to state police investigators. He also offered a $10,000 reward in addition to the $5,000 already promised by the Pennsylvania State Police for credible information about Brenda's case. Maines expressed hope that his investigation would finally bring closure and peace to Brenda's family, even though the case remained officially open. He added that he hopes the perpetrator turns himself in, providing Brenda's family with the resolution that they seek and deserve. Maines is of the opinion that Brenda Condon's case has been solved. However, it is still ongoing officially. Similarly, the police had also reported having a few new leads that they weren't yet ready to disclose to the public. Call 1-800-4PA-TIPS or 1-800-472-8477 or submit a tip online to get in touch with PA Crime Stoppers if you have any information regarding Brenda's case. Currently, the investigation is being handled by the Pennsylvania State Police Rockview Station. You can also reach them by dialing 814-355-7545. In the dark, cold streets of Calgary during the 1970s, 4 young women vanished under chilling circumstances. It would take over 40 years for their families to finally get answers. This is the story of Eva Violet Dvorak, Patricia Marie McQueen, Melissa Ann Rehorek, and Barbara Jean McLean, whose lives were tragically cut short by a brutal serial killer whose crimes went unsolved for decades. Each of these young women met a tragic and violent end. Eva and Patricia's bodies were discovered in a wooded area, their deaths initially classified as sudden but suspicious. Melissa and Barbara were both found strangled, their bodies bearing marks of a fierce struggle. Despite the immediate response from law enforcement, the lack of advanced forensic technology at the time left investigators with few leads, and the cases grew cold. Eva was a typical teenager, full of life and excitement. Born on September 2, 1961, she was the youngest of 11 children in a loving family. Eva loved music, sports, and playing pranks on her siblings. Her adventurous spirit and independent nature were evident even at a young age. She often went swimming or roller skating with her sisters and cousins, and had a big circle of friends for a girl her age. Eva was 14 years old and an 8th grade student at Ian Bazalgette Junior High School in Calgary. Eva Violet Dvorak and Patricia Marie McQueen were inseparable friends, both just 14 years old. Patsy, as Patricia was affectionately called, was born into a big family with 10 siblings, 6 sisters, and 4 brothers. Patsy loved baseball and, like any teen, was into music and dancing. She had a great sense of humor and loved to play pranks. She always talked about traveling, saying she could not wait to grow up and see the world. On February 15, 1976, Eva and Patricia disappeared under mysterious circumstances, leaving their families devastated and desperate for answers. The day started ordinarily for the 2 girls, who were known for their lively personalities and love for adventure. However, it soon took a tragic turn that would haunt their families for decades. Eva Dvorak and Patty McQueen left their classes and spent time at their friends' homes. They planned to party over the weekend but failed to return or contact their families, causing concern. Their parents reported them missing, prompting an investigation. Interviews with classmates revealed the girls' involvement in minor substance use, mainly marijuana and some chemicals, but no hardcore drugs. The girls were last seen alive in Calgary, and their sudden disappearance sparked immediate concern. Despite extensive searches and widespread media coverage, the bodies of Eva and Patricia were discovered under an overpass near Calgary. The exact circumstances of their deaths remained unclear, with the medical examiner unable to determine the precise cause. The lack of conclusive evidence led to their deaths being initially classified as sudden but suspicious. The girls were found fully clothed, without obvious signs of assault. Despite extensive investigations, no illegal substances were detected, and the cause of death was determined to be asphyxia, suggesting they simply stopped breathing. The autopsy revealed no significant findings to explain their deaths, leading to a classification of sudden but suspicious deaths. A newspaper article 6 weeks later painted the girls in a negative light, suggesting they willingly took illegal substances and had alcohol on their breath. The article alleged they had been asked to leave school early on Friday due to this. It portrayed them as party hoppers, staying with friends, drinking, and using drugs. However, these were minors incapable of fully understanding the consequences of their actions, and their deaths remained a grim mystery. Melissa Ann Rehorek, a 20-year-old housekeeper, had recently moved to Calgary from Ontario in the spring of 1976. Known for her adventurous spirit and positive outlook, Melissa quickly adapted to her new environment. On the evening of September 15, 1976, Melissa was last seen by her roommate, expressing her intention to hitchhike out of the city during her days off. Dressed up in a blue denim jacket, skirt, and a red blouse, she left around 8:30 p.m., possibly dropped off near Highway 1 in the Bowness area. The next day, a hiker discovered Melissa's body in a ditch 22 kilometers west of Calgary. She had been asphyxiated and suffered a blow to the head. Long black hair strands found in her hand suggested a struggle. Despite extensive investigations, the hair did not lead to a suspect, and her case went cold. The DNA analysis in the 1990s failed to identify the assailant due to the lack of a national database at the time. Barbara Jean McLean, a 19-year-old bank employee, had moved to Calgary from Nova Scotia just 6 months before her untimely death. Barbara had left the town of Innis, Nova Scotia, seeking better opportunities. There she lived with her brothers. Homesick, Barbara planned a visit home in early March and even considered college. On the night of February 25, 1977, Barbara joined friends at the Highlander Hotel bar for an evening out. She had argued with her boyfriend and decided to hitchhike home. She was last seen walking alone from the hotel in the early hours of February 26th. Her body was discovered several hours later by a dog walker in the area of 6th Street and 80th Avenue NE, Calgary. Barbara's body bore signs of a violent struggle, with numerous marks and bruises, and she had been strangled. Investigators believed that she had fought back against her attacker, as evidenced by the blood found on her left hand and foreign hairs on her body. Despite extensive efforts, including interviewing hundreds of taxi drivers and collecting hair samples from over 600 men, the case grew cold with no significant leads. The immediate response from law enforcement included thorough searches and interviews with potential witnesses. However, the lack of advanced forensic technology at the time severely hindered the investigation. Despite collecting crucial evidence, including seminal fluid from the crime scenes, the inability to develop a DNA profile left investigators with few actionable leads. The families of Eva, Patricia, Melissa, and Barbara were left in anguish, grappling with the devastating loss of their loved ones and the uncertainty surrounding their deaths. For decades, these cases remained unsolved, casting a long shadow over the community and leaving a lasting impact on the victims' families. Seminal fluid had been found at the crime scenes of Melissa Ann Rehorek and Barbara Jean McLean, but the technology to develop a DNA profile did not exist at the time. Consequently, these cases went cold, leaving the families and the community in a state of prolonged anguish. The turning point came in the early 2000s with significant advancements in DNA analysis. In 2003, enhanced DNA technology enabled investigators to confirm that the same suspect was linked to both Melissa Ray Horek and Barbara McLean's murders. However, despite this breakthrough, the DNA profile did not match any entries in the National DNA Databank, and the suspect remained unidentified, referred to only as Individual A. In 2021, the Alberta RCMP and Calgary Police Service decided to employ a relatively new tool in criminal investigations: investigative genetic genealogy, IgG. This technique involves using genetic information from distant relatives to build a family tree that can help identify potential suspects. The DNA profile developed from the crime scene evidence was uploaded to GEDmatch and Family Tree DNA, two databases used for genetic genealogy. Investigators re-examined the evidence collected from the crime scenes of Eva Dvorak, Patricia McQueen, Melissa Ray Horek, and Barbara McLean. With the assistance of Parabon Nanolabs this time, a comprehensive genetic profile was created from the DNA evidence. Genealogists then began the painstaking task of building a family tree from this profile, identifying potential relatives of the unknown suspect. The genetic genealogy analysis pointed to Gary Allen Sereri, a U.S. citizen with a history of violent offenses, as a potential match. Sereri had an extensive criminal record, including convictions for rape, kidnapping, and other violent crimes. He had illegally entered Canada in the mid-1970s and lived under various aliases. Sereri was deported to the U.S. in 2003 and died in an Idaho prison in 2011 while serving a sentence for rape. To confirm Sereri's involvement, RCMP investigators, with assistance from the Idaho State Police Forensic Services and Interpol, compared his DNA to the profiles developed from the crime scenes. The match was conclusive. Gary Allen Sereri's DNA was present on all four victims, confirming him as the perpetrator of the murders of Eva Dvorak, Patricia McQueen, Melissa Ray Horek, and Barbara McLean. Sereri was born in 1942 and grew up in Illinois before moving to California in the mid-1950s. His early life was marked by instability and a propensity for violence. By the time he reached adulthood, he had developed a criminal record that would foreshadow the horrors he would later commit. Sereri's criminal history began with petty thefts, but quickly escalated to more violent crimes. In 1965, he was arrested in Los Angeles for a violent sexual assault and was subsequently convicted of sexual assault by force and kidnapping. His time in prison, including stints in San Quentin, did little to rehabilitate him. Instead, Sereri continued his violent behavior, living a transient lifestyle and using numerous aliases to evade law enforcement. Sereri's ability to evade capture was aided by his frequent changes in appearance, residence, and even identity. After posting bail for a rape charge in California in the early 1970s, he fled to Canada, where he lived illegally under various names, including Willie Blackman and Rex Long. During his time in Canada, Sereri worked sporadically as a cook and manual laborer, often relying on welfare and other under-the-table jobs to support himself. From 1976 to 1977, Sereri was living in Calgary, Alberta, where he committed the brutal murders of Eva Dvorak, Patricia McQueen, Melissa Ray Horek, and Barbara McLean. His ability to blend into the background and the lack of advanced forensic technology at the time allowed him to continue his criminal activities unchecked. Sereri's violent tendencies and manipulative behavior made him a dangerous predator, capable of committing heinous acts without remorse. In 1998, Sereri was arrested in New Westminster, British Columbia, for an assault, marking one of the few times he had significant contact with law enforcement in Canada. His arrest and subsequent conviction led to his deportation to the United States in 2003. Despite his criminal history, Sereri managed to live under the radar until his final arrest, which resulted in a prison sentence for rape. He died in 2011 while serving time in an Idaho prison. Gary Allen Sereri's name became synonymous with terror when his connection to the murders of Ava Dvorak, Patricia McQueen, Melissa Rehorek, and Barbara McLean was finally uncovered. His identification as a killer brought a mixture of relief and sorrow to the families of Eva, Patricia, Melissa, and Barbara. The families had endured decades of uncertainty, haunted by the loss of their loved ones and the lack of answers. The confirmation of Sreri as the killer provided long-awaited closure, but it also reopened old wounds as they confronted the brutal reality of the crimes once more. Nonetheless, they expressed gratitude to the dedicated investigators who never gave up on the case. They hoped that their story would inspire other families with unresolved cases to hold on to hope. They also called for ongoing support for forensic advancements, stressing that the relentless pursuit of justice can eventually bring closure and peace. The community, too, was affected by the news. The knowledge that such a violent individual had lived among them, committing horrific acts, was a sobering reminder of the dangers that can lurk beneath the surface of everyday life. The successful resolution of these cold cases underscored the power of modern forensic techniques, particularly investigative genetic genealogy, IgG, as it set a precedent for the use of IgG in solving other cold cases, demonstrating how combining traditional investigative methods with cutting-edge technology can yield results even after many years. Nearly half a century after the first investigations began, the RCMP uncovered the truth for the surviving loved ones of the victims. While the unmasking of Gary Allen Sreri cannot undo the pain and loss experienced by the victims' families, it does provide a sense of closure and underscores the vital role of modern technology in solving cold cases. The families of the victims thanked the authorities for their efforts, expressing relief and sorrow as they finally confronted the brutal reality of the crimes. The story of Eva Violet Dvorak, Patricia Marie McQueen, Melissa Ann Rehorek, and Barbara Jean McLean is a poignant reminder of the fragility of life and the enduring impact of violent crime. Their tragic deaths left an indelible mark on their families and the community, but their legacy also includes the tireless efforts of investigators who never gave up on finding the truth, and the advancements in forensic science that ultimately brought a killer to justice. On the chilly morning of December 4, 1999, a shocking discovery was made in Sanford, Florida. A pedestrian, scavenging for recyclables in a wooded area behind an AAMCO transmission shop, stumbled upon the lifeless body of Sherry Holtz. This discovery would spark an investigation that spanned nearly a quarter of a century. Sherry Holtz, a 50-year-old woman known for her vivacious personality and resilience, was found lying on a concrete slab, her body showing clear signs of a brutal assault. Her throat had been viciously slashed, the deep wound being a testament to the violence she endured. Additionally, investigators noted evidence of blunt force trauma, strangulation, and sexual battery. Much of her clothing was pulled off, indicating that she had likely been sexually assaulted before her death. The initial investigation revealed that Holtz was last seen alive on the evening of December 3, 1999. She had spent that night at a local bar in Sanford, a place she frequented. Witnesses recalled seeing her leave the bar alone, seemingly unaware of the danger that lay ahead. The timeline was crucial for investigators, narrowing down the window during which she met her tragic fate. At the scene, a lock-blade knife was found near her body. The knife had traces of blood and other DNA evidence, but the samples were too small and degraded, making it impossible to conduct conclusive DNA testing with the technology available in 2000. Despite this, the evidence was meticulously preserved in the hopes that future advancements in forensic science would provide the answers needed. The initial investigation also focused heavily on Holtz's personal life, particularly her relationship with her longtime boyfriend, Gary Durrance. Interviews with their 3 roommates revealed a tumultuous relationship marked by frequent arguments and domestic disputes. On the night before her murder, Durrance and Holtz had a particularly severe altercation, resulting in Durrance allegedly kicking her out of their shared home. This placed Durrance high on the list of persons of interest. However, Durrance's alibi for the night of the murder presented significant gaps. According to the roommates, Durrance was at the house on Crow's Bluff on the night of December 3rd, but left at some point late in the evening or early the next morning, returning between 2:30 a.m. and 7 a.m. This incomplete alibi complicated the investigation, as there were no concrete eyewitnesses or physical evidence tying him directly to the crime scene at the critical times. Another major challenge was the couple's history of domestic violence. Multiple calls had been made to law enforcement over the years regarding disputes between Holtz and Durrance, but these incidents did not provide the concrete evidence needed to secure an arrest at the time. Also, the initial forensic examination of Holtz's body revealed further details of the horrific violence she endured. Along with the deep laceration to her throat, she had sustained significant blunt force trauma and showed signs of strangulation and sexual battery. These findings indicated a prolonged and violent struggle, suggesting that her attacker had a deep-seated rage or personal vendetta against her. However, the lack of solid forensic evidence and reliable witness testimonies left the case stagnant, causing frustration among the investigators and the community. The case of Sherry Holtz's brutal slaying remained cold for over 2 decades, one of many that haunted the small town of Sanford. Yet, her story remained in the minds of those who sought justice, a grim reminder of the work that still needed to be done. With the dawn of the 21st century, forensic science began to evolve rapidly. The hope that had kept the case open for years would eventually find its reward, proving that time, technology, and perseverance can converge to solve even the most challenging mysteries. In May 2023, the Sanford Police Department made the critical decision to reopen Sherry Holtz's case. This move was driven by the significant advancements in forensic technology that had emerged over the years. The preserved DNA evidence from the original investigation, which had been too degraded and insufficient for conclusive testing in 2000, was now re-evaluated using state-of-the-art methods. The re-examination of the evidence was a meticulous process. Forensic experts utilized the latest DNA testing techniques to analyze the blood and other biological materials found on the lockblade knife, discovered near Sherry's body. The advances in forensic science allowed for the extraction and amplification of DNA from even the smallest and most degraded samples, providing new possibilities for identification. By June 2024, the results from the updated DNA analysis were in. The tests conclusively identified Gary Durrance, Sherry's longtime boyfriend, as the primary suspect. This breakthrough was a pivotal moment in the investigation, confirming the suspicions that had lingered for nearly 25 years, while providing the concrete proof needed to move forward with an arrest. On July 18, 2024, Gary Durrance was arrested in Volusia County with the assistance of local deputies. He was charged with second-degree murder under the accusations of premeditated violence and a clear intent to kill, and taken into custody at the Seminole County Jail without bond. With Durrance now in detention, the legal proceedings began to unfold. During the preliminary hearings, the prosecution laid out the details of the investigation, highlighting the tumultuous relationship between Sherry Holtz and Gary Durrance. Witness testimonies from the couple's roommates painted a picture of a volatile relationship marked by frequent arguments and physical altercations. The prosecution also detailed the gaps in Durrance's alibi on the night of Sherry's murder. Despite his inconsistent statements, the timeline suggested that Durrance had ample opportunity to commit the crime. The history of domestic violence calls to their residence further supported the narrative of a dangerous and abusive relationship, reinforcing the motive for the crime. As the case proceeded, the defense attempted to cast doubt on the reliability of the DNA evidence and the testimonies provided by the roommates. However, the advancements in forensic technology and the meticulous preservation of the evidence over the years made it difficult to dispute the findings. The strength of the DNA evidence, combined with the compelling witness testimonies, built a robust case against Durrance. Currently, the legal proceedings are ongoing, with the next court date set for September 10, 2024. As the case progresses, the focus remains on securing a conviction that reflects the severity of the crime and provides justice for Sherry Holtz. "It's some relief, you know. It's something I've carried around for 24 years, Sherry's son, Eric Holtz, said in a statement. "There was always a mustard seed of faith that something would change. I didn't know how, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, DNA comes to the rescue." Holtz, who's now 56, says he's forgiven the man, but he just wants to know why his mother was killed. "I am grateful that the man was arrested. There is something that is lingering in the back of my mind. Did he leave behind any other victims in the past 24 years of domestic violence or anything else that hasn't been reported?" Sanford Police Chief Cecil Smith and the Sanford Police Department expressed their commitment to seeing the case through to a just conclusion. Chief Smith emphasized that the arrest brought a sense of closure to Sherry Holtz's family and underscored the community's commitment to justice. October 10, 2005. At Phoenix Sky Harbor International Airport, a janitor makes a horrifying discovery. Inside a restroom trash can wrapped in a hotel bag lies the lifeless body of a newborn girl. This tiny infant, who will soon be named Baby Skyler, had lived for only about 24 hours before her life was tragically cut short. The initial investigation, led by the FBI Phoenix Violent Crime Task Force, was immediately launched. The scale of the task is daunting. With the airport's daily traffic averaging over 100,000 travelers, identifying potential suspects proves overwhelming. Detectives sift through countless possibilities, review hours of surveillance footage, and interview numerous travelers and airport staff. Despite their extensive efforts, the case quickly goes cold. Leads are scarce, and the identity of baby Skyler and her mother remains a mystery. Years pass, and the story of baby Skyler fades from the headlines but not from the hearts of those who heard it. Candlelight vigils are held, and the community continues to hope for answers. The memory of the tiny infant left in such tragic circumstances serves as a haunting reminder of an unresolved mystery. In November 2021, nearly 16 years after baby Skyler was found, a breakthrough comes. Investigators decide to revisit the evidence using advanced forensic techniques, specifically investigative genetic genealogy, IgG. The evidence collected at the scene in 2005 includes a crucial DNA sample. Through IgG, detectives identify a possible maternal match, leading them to Annie Anderson, who is living in Snohomish County, Washington. In January 2022, Arizona investigators execute a search warrant and interview Anderson. During this interview, Anderson confirms that she is baby Skyler's mother and reveals that she had been in Phoenix in 2005 for a real estate boot camp. Based on this new evidence and her confession, a Maricopa County grand jury issues a warrant for her arrest. Anderson is taken into custody in Washington and later extradited to Arizona, facing charges of first-degree murder, child abuse, and concealing a dead body. The news of Anderson's arrest brings a mix of relief and sorrow to the community. For many, it is a moment of justice long overdue. The case had haunted the Phoenix community for years, and the arrest rekindles hope that baby Skyler will finally receive the justice she deserves. The legal proceedings that follow are closely watched. Anderson's defense argues that there is insufficient evidence to convict her, emphasizing that the DNA evidence, while compelling, needs to be considered alongside other circumstantial evidence. The prosecution, however, presents a robust case built on the DNA match and Anderson's confession. During the trial, the prosecution highlights the meticulous work of the investigators who never gave up on the case. They detail the use of investigative genetic genealogy, which ultimately led them to Anderson. The defense focuses on questioning the reliability of the DNA evidence and the circumstances of Anderson's confession. Despite the defense's efforts, the evidence against Anderson was overwhelming. On March 15, 2024, after a thorough examination of all the facts, Anderson is found guilty of first-degree murder, child abuse, and concealing a dead body. The verdict is a moment of closure for many, bringing an end to a case that had remained unsolved for far too long. The guilty verdict in Anderson's trial brings a wave of emotions throughout the Phoenix community and beyond. For those who had been touched by baby Skyler's story, the news is both a relief and a poignant reminder of the long journey to justice. Community members and advocates who had followed the case express a sense of closure. Vigils are held once again, this time in remembrance, and to honor the justice finally achieved for baby Skyler. Many recall the vigils from years past and speak of the renewed sense of peace that the verdict brings. The case becomes a symbol of the importance of never giving up on seeking justice, no matter how much time has passed. Following the success of IgG in the baby Skyler case, several jurisdictions implement policies to ensure that DNA evidence from cold cases is periodically reviewed using the latest available technology. This proactive approach aims to prevent cases from languishing unsolved for decades and to provide closure to families and communities affected by such crimes. The case underscores the importance of community involvement and awareness in solving cold cases. Public interest and pressure can play a significant role in keeping cases active and encouraging the allocation of resources needed for thorough investigations. Community support and advocacy prove crucial in maintaining momentum in the pursuit of justice. The use of genetic genealogy raises important ethical questions about privacy and consent. The baby Skyler case sparks discussions about the balance between solving crimes and protecting individual rights. These discussions are crucial in shaping policies that ensure the responsible use of genetic data in criminal investigations.
In August 1980, the routine of two farm workers in Dixon, California, was shattered by a gruesome discovery. As they navigated through the dense cornfield, they stumbled upon the lifeless body of a young woman. She had been shot multiple times in the head and neck, and it was clear she had been subjected to a violent and brutal assault. The workers immediately alerted the authorities, who arrived swiftly to begin their investigation. The victim was quickly determined to be a young white female, but there were no immediate clues to her identity. She had no identification, and there were no personal belongings that could provide a hint about who she was. The investigators noted the signs of a struggle. Her clothes were intact, but showed evidence of a violent confrontation. Forensic examination revealed she had been assaulted before being fatally shot at close range, indicating a personal and violent attack. Without any leads or identification, the authorities labeled her Jane Doe. The Solano County Sheriff's Office took charge of the investigation, but progress was painstakingly slow. Extensive media coverage and public appeals for information yielded no useful leads. The local community was canvassed, residents were interviewed, and missing persons reports from surrounding areas were meticulously checked. but nothing matched the young woman's profile. It was as if she had appeared from nowhere and met a tragic end in the cornfield. Years passed with no breakthroughs. In 1992, a significant development occurred when the National Missing Persons Unit reached out to the Solano County Coroner's Office. They had a potential match for Jane Doe from their extensive database. The missing person in question was Holly Ann Campiglia from Cherry Hill, New Jersey, who had been reported missing nearly 12 years earlier. The details aligned, and DNA analysis confirmed the match. Holly was 21 years old at the time of her death. She had traveled from New Jersey to California, but the reasons behind her journey and the events leading to her untimely demise remained unclear. Despite this breakthrough, the case remained unsolved, and the person responsible for Holly's death was still at large. Holly Ann Campiglia was born on May 12, 1959, in Cherry Hill, Bergen County, New Jersey. She was the daughter of Augustine A. Campiglia and Sally Avery Campiglia. Holly grew up in a close-knit family with 4 sisters, Daryl Ann, Dawn, Jonna, and Karen. Described as a vibrant and adventurous young woman, Holly's decision to travel to California was characteristic of her free-spirited nature. The 1980s initial investigation into Holly's case had yielded little actionable evidence, and by the time her identity was confirmed, a significant amount of time had passed. Leads had gone cold, and the trail of the killer had vanished into the decades. Moreover, the forensic techniques available in the 1980s and early 1990s were rudimentary compared to modern standards, and the evidence collected from the crime scene had not provided any immediate breakthroughs. Deputy Jose Joe Cisneros was the original investigator assigned to Holly Ann Campiglia's case. He worked diligently to uncover the details surrounding her tragic death and remained committed to finding justice for her and her family. Unfortunately, Deputy Cisneros was killed in the line of duty in 1985, 5 years after Holly's body was discovered. Despite his untimely death, his early efforts and dedication to the case laid the groundwork for future investigations. The case of Holly Ann Campiglia's slaying became one of many cold cases that haunted the Solano County Sheriff's Office. The authorities did not give up, but each passing year made it increasingly difficult to uncover new evidence or locate witnesses who might remember something crucial. The original investigators had either retired or moved on, and new detectives inherited the daunting task of solving a seemingly unsolvable crime. In 2021, a ray of hope emerged. Holly's family, still grieving and seeking justice, requested a re-examination of the evidence using modern forensic technology. This re-examination was a crucial turning point in the case. Advances in DNA analysis had revolutionized forensic science, making it possible to detect and analyze genetic material that would have been undetectable in the past. An evidence technician meticulously reviewed the original evidence, searching for any traces of DNA that could be tested with the new technology. After months of painstaking work, the technician found a sample of male DNA. This discovery was a significant breakthrough. The DNA was submitted to a national database, and the results came back with a match. Herman Lee Hobbs, a convicted felon already serving life sentences for other violent crimes. With the DNA evidence conclusively linking Herman Lee Hobbs to the slaying of Holly Ann Campiglia, the Solano County Sheriff's Office prepared to bring him to justice. Detectives worked meticulously to build a solid case against Hobbs, ensuring that the decades-old crime would finally see a courtroom. Hobbs, already serving life sentences for other violent crimes, was not a stranger to the judicial system. His criminal history included a series of heinous acts, most notably the 1975 slaying of 13-year-old Terry Pata. Pata had been abducted, assaulted, and slain, her body found stuffed in a drain pipe. The conviction for Pata's slaying had come years later, in 2005, thanks to advancements in DNA technology. Hobbs was also convicted for the assault of a 15-year-old girl in 2000, which had further solidified his status as a dangerous and violent offender. In late 2021, after the DNA evidence from Holly's case pointed to Hobbs, detectives obtained a warrant to collect a new DNA sample from him. This sample confirmed the match to the evidence found at the crime scene in 1980, providing irrefutable proof of his involvement in Holly's slaying. With this crucial piece of evidence, Hobbs was formally charged with first-degree slaying, including an enhancement for the use of a firearm. He was transferred from state prison to Solano County Jail to face these new charges. The pretrial phase was crucial for establishing the foundation of the case. Preliminary hearings were held to determine if the evidence was sufficient to proceed to trial. Both sides prepared meticulously for the trial. The prosecution focused on compiling a comprehensive case that highlighted the forensic evidence and the consistent pattern of Hobbs's past crimes. Meanwhile, the defense scrutinized the evidence, looking for weaknesses and possible alternate explanations for the DNA match. The trial featured emotional testimonies from Holly's family, who recounted their memories and the impact of her loss. Forensic experts provided technical details about the evidence, while detectives discussed the investigation and the process that led to Hobbs's arrest. After days of deliberation, the jury returned a guilty verdict on July 15, 2024. Herman Lee Hobbs was found guilty of the slaying of Holly Ann Campiglia. The judge sentenced him to 15 years to life in prison, to be served consecutively with his existing sentences. The conviction brought a measure of closure to Holly's family, who had fought tirelessly for justice over the years. They expressed relief and a sense of peace, although they acknowledged that nothing could bring Holly back. The Solano County Sheriff's Office, along with other Northern California law enforcement agencies, began to re-examine cold cases that showed similarities to Holly's slaying and other crimes committed by Hobbs. They focused particularly on cases involving young female victims who had been assaulted and slain, especially those that had remained unsolved for decades. One such case was the slaying of Brenda Ann Tucker, a 29-year-old woman who went missing in 1994. Her remains were discovered in 2001, and although Hobbs had been charged with the crime, the charges were ultimately dismissed due to insufficient evidence. With advancements in forensic technologies and the experience gained from solving Holly's case, investigators hope to revisit these cold cases and find the necessary evidence to bring further charges against Hobbs. The resolution of Holly's case served as a powerful example of the enduring quest for justice and the impact of determined, persistent investigation efforts. Alisa Susan Williams was born on August 10, 1981, and lived with her mother, Denise Frazier Daniel, in Cincinnati, Ohio. She was just 8 months old when her life took a tragic turn. On April 29, 1982, Alisa was abducted by her legal father, Isaiah Williams, during a violent altercation at Denise's residence. Isaiah Williams had a complex relationship with Denise and Alisa. He was not Alisa's biological father, as Alisa was conceived while Isaiah was in prison. Despite this, after his release, he resumed his relationship with Denise and legally recognized Alisa as his daughter. On that fateful day in April 1982, Isaiah forcefully took Alisa from Denise, leaving her desperate and fearful for her daughter's safety. He then transported Alisa to Ann Arbor, Michigan, marking the beginning of a harrowing journey that would span decades. The abduction was initially dismissed by law enforcement as a custody dispute, which significantly hampered the initial investigation. In the weeks following the abduction, Isaiah was seen with Alisa in Michigan. On July 4, 1982, they attended a family reunion in Inkster, Michigan. Witnesses, including Isaiah's brother, reported that Alisa appeared to be in good health during this gathering. However, this would be the last time anyone outside Isaiah's immediate circle saw her alive. As the summer progressed, Isaiah's erratic behavior and contradictory statements raised suspicions. He took Alisa to his ex-wife's home, where she too noted the baby seemed fine. But just days later, Alisa was nowhere to be found. On July 9th, Isaiah was served with a summons ordering him to produce Alisa in court. By July 10th, Alisa had disappeared. Isaiah's explanations for Alisa's disappearance varied wildly. He initially claimed to have last seen her in June 1982, which contradicted witness statements. He later admitted to smoking marijuana and drinking alcohol while with Alisa at Island Park, a 35-acre space in the middle of the Huron River. He claimed he fell asleep, and when he awoke, Alisa was gone. He did not report her missing immediately, allegedly believing Denise or one of her family members had taken her. The inconsistency of Isaiah's accounts and the lack of immediate police action meant valuable time and evidence were lost. Despite extensive searches of the Huron River and surrounding areas, no trace of Alisa was found. The case went cold, leaving Denise in a state of perpetual agony, clinging to the hope of finding her daughter. Following decades of stalled progress, the case of Alisa Williams was reignited in 2021 when new interviews and investigative efforts by the Ann Arbor Police Department shed fresh light on the long cold case. In October 2021, the Ann Arbor Police referred the case to the Michigan Attorney General's office, leading to a pivotal breakthrough. Isaiah Williams was finally arrested and charged with one count of open murder. This charge allowed the prosecution to pursue different theories of the crime, given the ambiguity surrounding Alisa's disappearance and presumed death. The renewed investigation focused on the inconsistencies in Isaiah's stories and his history of domestic violence. These factors painted a grim picture of what likely transpired during the summer of 1982. Key witnesses, including family members who last saw Alisa at the family reunion in July 1982, provided testimony that contradicted Isaiah's claim of losing Alisa in June of that year. Throughout the investigation, Isaiah's behavior and statements remained erratic. He had previously told Denise multiple conflicting stories about Alisa's fate, including claims that she was alive and well in another location, had died in a hospital, or had been killed. These conflicting narratives were central to building a case against him, highlighting his attempts to obfuscate the truth and evade responsibility. The trial of Isaiah Williams commenced in early 2024. Prosecutors presented evidence of his inconsistent statements, history of violence, and the impossibility of his claims regarding Alisa's disappearance. The defense argued that there was no concrete evidence proving Alisa's death, given that her body was never found. However, the prosecution emphasized the legal concept of corpus delicti, which allows for a conviction based on circumstantial evidence when a body is not recovered, especially in cases involving violent crimes and contradictory accounts from the accused. On May 10, 2024, after weeks of testimony and deliberation, the jury found Isaiah Williams guilty of felony murder and first-degree premeditated murder. The verdict was a significant moment for Denise and Alisa's extended family, who had endured decades of uncertainty and pain. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel lauded the efforts of law enforcement and prosecutors, acknowledging their unwavering commitment to seeking justice for Alisa. Isaiah Williams is scheduled to be sentenced on July 10, 2024. He faces a mandatory life sentence without the possibility of parole, bringing some measure of closure to a case that has haunted Alisa's family for over 40 years.
If you find this video compelling, show your support by giving it a thumbs up, subscribing to our channel, and ringing that notification bell. By doing so, you'll stay updated about the latest investigations and mysteries. Your support means the world to us as we continue to pursue the truth in the world of cold cases.